This podcast and every other podcast that I make is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. They get episodes of this particular show early and ad-free, as well as totally unedited cuts if we have edits, and a bunch of other cool bonus content. So if you want to support this very independent show that runs entirely without sponsorships, make sure you check us out on Patreon.
I'm a composer, Alana's a writer, Abubakar Salim is a game director, and Mike is just, I guess, an actor?
Some guy.
I think yeah. I've been
Coder, you're a programmer.
I'm a programmer.
He's here because
Chat
he's
will
a
be
pretty
excited.
face.
Yeah.
It's always been my role.
Yeah,
It's always been my
we-
role.
I think the game director slot has been usurped, in other words.
I respect it. As it should be.
Somebody this week came out with their first video game.
Oh my god.
How you doing?
I don't know what let's learn the back.
I agree. Totally understand. No, I really wanted to have you on
Look
the show.
forward to the subtitle auto-generated.
Yeah, I've never heard it
fantastic.
put so beautifully in my
you know
life.
what I
It's
mean?
amazing.
Like that's how I feel right now. It's very surreal. Like, you know, the review day was a weird one. That was like tense. Launch day was a buzz and really great. Then the day after is like, okay.
Now what?
And then now I'm like, oh man. So it's just
Well, you're in a
like,
safe place.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
catching you in the still the eye of the hurricane, though. All this is extremely fresh.
Yeah.
it's very surreal, I think, because again, this is the first time being in like the driving seat of something that you know, directing something, especially in an area that you have no idea about, right? Like, you know, it's very surreal, but at the same time, it's kind of cool because you're like, oh wow, you've created something that's now the world has, you know, can have an opinion on. But yeah, I am like, it's a whirlwind, man.
For sure. The reason that I really want to talk to you, outside of thinking you're great, is I feel like you like fulfilled the dream that a lot of people want to fulfill. Excuse that my webcam keeps freezing. It is what it is. You're the guy who in this situation said, I want to make a video game. Let's fucking make a video game. Most people don't do it, but you like did the thing. Our audience may know you as Bayek of Siwa in Assassin's Creed Origins. That's how I was first introduced to your work. And then to find out that Bayek of Siwa is now a game director on this very cool, unique looking, very heartfelt game is so unexpected and so cool. So I really wanted to just be like, how did this come about? How did you decide to do the thing and then go from I have this idea to just fucking doing it?
Honestly, it was just that sense of just saying like, this is what I want to do. I want to do it. I want to take a stab. I had no idea what it really meant to make a game. I had no idea what it would take. But I remember asking a lot of people. I even had a conversation with you, Mike, like at the beginning.
I remember it, yeah. I remember.
Starting a studio. And it was one of those ones where I
When
was
is
just like...
the beginning?
Oh, man, like 2019, 2020 around-ish.
I don't think it was that long after Origins came out, right? Maybe just a couple of years, basically.
Like a couple of years after Origins, I'd say. But like it was, you know, I'd say really truly, Origins was like the seed planting of like, oh, you can actually make a video game, you know. And I think then having been nominated from that and then being introduced to more people in the games industry, that's when I was like, oh man, this is an actual space. Like this is a place to play in, right? And I'd say it was only until actually doing Raised by Wolves and having someone like Ridley Scott be like, yeah, you're good, where I was like, you know, fuck it, I'm going to do this. I'm going to like actually make a game. I'm going to try and tell a story through a medium that I have no idea about. And don't get me wrong, it's terrifying, right? Like, you know, everything pointed towards actually doing the safe bet and making like a film or doing something like that, right? But the idea of making a game, I think, is both this element of ignorance of not knowing what it would take, but at the same time knowing that it's a medium that I really do care about, that really sort of drove me to just essentially dive into this thing, knowing full well that it's going to be a roller coaster ride. And oh my God, and I don't like roller coasters. So it's like,
Was there temptation? I was actually, you kind of glanced at something that you made me curious about. I had assumed that you had done game VO work before Origins, but the way you phrased it make it sound like that was
Origins was the first. Yeah, Origins was my first thing.
True, yeah. So, bearing that in mind, what was there temptation to make a film? I mean, you make it sound like that was sort of in a way the path of least resistance, but you rejected it. Were you gonna at some point?
It was, so the thing is, I think because of the specific story that I wanted to tell, and because it was so, linked to because the thing is, it's like everyone tells you to write what you know, right? And like, I think like, for me, I really wanted to find a way of expressing, and this journey of grief, because everything that I had either read or played or even seen, it just didn't really hit me. It didn't really kind of help
cut you
me.
off, but I do feel like this is really important. What game are we talking about?
Oh, we're talking about Tales of Kenzera Zao, right?
Thank you. We've not mentioned the name of your video game at any point.
This is a very professional video game podcast, okay?
You can take the Alana out of the IGN and other journalistic impulses, but not the other way around.
People might want to play it, and we just didn't even mention the name of the game.
That's hilarious. Yeah, Tales of Kenzera Zao. So yeah, like, look. So the thing is like I just didn't feel like anything really stuck, right? And don't get me wrong, like I'd written like a script that I was gonna pitch that kind of explored grief, but it didn't work. I'd sort of played with the idea of just even writing it, designing an idea of a game, of a story, and then giving it to like Ubisoft, because at the time obviously they were the only people I kind of knew, right? But that just didn't feel right. So the idea, it just made sense to make a video game because of how closely it's linked to my father, how closely it's linked to my upbringing, and just like express it in that way, shape and form. The way I've kind of approached it, right, is it's like an art form. It's like me trying to make my own little indie film, essentially, is how I've kind of gone about it. And yeah, I've been very lucky to have kind of been partnered with the Originals team, the EA Originals team, and build it that way. But like, yeah, it was very much driven by this sense of it had to be a video game. Like it really couldn't be anything else. And if I didn't get this out of my system, I would have been doing myself a disservice.
Did you have a lot of people tell you? Did you have a lot of people tell you no? Like, I think if somebody came to me and was like, "Listen, I have very limited experience making video games. I'm going to be a game director and I'm going to make a game." I think I would have been like, "You should maybe try doing something else first." But you just like went for it.
I think everyone told me no.
I honestly, cards on the table, I think I was a bit skeptical. Like, it was hi, I'd like to be the first actor turned game director in history.
That's crazy.
Please. Like, sure. Like, yeah. Like, I remember you were enthusiastic and you were excited. And I think there was, it's the thing you said of kind of, you didn't know what you didn't know. So it was kind of, I think that put you in a position. The thing that fascinates me about what you're saying is the whole, is generally, and this is again because of the unique way you've kind of come at it, the idea of like, I'm not sure if I want to tell this story via a film or a game is a fascinating entry point to a creative process because we're all square pegs and circular holes, right? If I want to tell a story, there's one way I can tell that story, and it's via a video game. Right. I could try and pitch a movie.
Mike, I mean, you the radio play, you could very easily write a screenplay.
Well, whether anyone will make it is probably a bigger question, right? Like, and I think that's what's interesting to me is the kind of, I wasn't fishing, by the way, that is like,
you didn't come across like you were, you're fine.
We're like, game studios make games, film studios make films,
sure.
and it's fascinating to me whenever I know a few people, because I do some stuff in the kind of film game intersection-y space that kind of talk about doing what you've done, but like you've actually just fucking done it, and I've got so much respect for that.
It's crazy, and you did it and pulled it off. It's so nuts. Like, it's just, again, a thing everyone would be like, you want to just be a game director? And I think we're the same age. You're born in 93.
Yeah,
and
93.
You're just a fucking game director. That's crazy. Like, you did it. It's just so wild.
Yeah.
So yeah, what was the point? Like, again, assuming a lot of people would have been like, I don't know if you should do this. What was it that kept you to it? Just really telling that story?
I think it was just the the drive to do it. You know, it's funny. Like, I think I'm very much the I don't know, maybe this is just a me thing, and this is how I unpack my whole life. This is my therapy session. I remember growing up and people telling me that, you know, I didn't know what I wanted to do, right, for a very long time. And, you know, I was at school and people were like, oh, you should do this, you should do that, or you should get a job here, you should get a job there. And I remember just thinking, I don't want to do anything that I don't want to do. And I kind of stumbled into acting, just, you know, kind of at drama, like, you know, doing drama and really enjoying it. And then when I learned that you could actually make money out of doing this, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I remember telling my drama teacher and people, and, like, you know, saying, like, I'm going to be an actor. And they all kind of looked at me like, okay, yeah,
True.
sure, whatever, good luck, you know? And that really, I think that really spurred me on to do this whole thing of like, well, I'm going to show you then. And essentially, you know, I've not done anything apart from acting, for example. Like, I remember, you know, a lot of my mates were like saying, oh, you should work at, you know, like a supermarket, or like, you know, do you understand the values of like a 9 to 5? And I was like, or I could just act. And so I was like, and I was very kind of dogmatic about it. And like, be it either if I was going to be doing like short films with friends of mine, or, you know, audition for like, you know, skins or whatever. Like, the point is, it's like, I was very much of the mentality of like, if I want to do something, I'll do it. And I think that mentality happened as well with this game. I think it very much was, this is something that I need to do. I want to do it. I want to make a game of, you know, of decent quality. Like, I'm going to try and put my all in it and do everything I can, but I need to make a game. I want to know the process. I want to learn what it means to, you know, to make something, because in my eyes as well, like, you can, you know, actors aren't made overnight. They're made over time, right? And I think like, that's especially with any sort of creative art, like, you have to express yourself slowly and find that kind of, find your vibe and find your method of it. And so for me, it was just really integral and important to get this game out, to make it, to express it in the best way I can, in order to be like, right, I know this process, now I can play in this process. Because, man, building a studio from like, because this is the thing,
So
like,
how
it wasn't
did
even
you do
making
that?
a game.
Literally, how?
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same. Like, how did you?
You've got 3 people on this call who are just saying, how?
Like, how?
Well, and specifically, you know, you obviously have a lot of like passion and enthusiasm, and that can go a long way. And especially knowing that the story you're wanting to tell comes from such a personal place, that also, to me, is a bit of a vote of confidence, because it means this isn't just some. It's not like
Not a
the
cash
game
grab.
equivalent of a I was gonna say a get rich quick scheme kind of mentality. It's like, no, I want to make this, even if not one person were to ever know about it or buy a single copy, it's a thing that I feel compelled to put out in the world. That's an easy recruitment tool, because it shows how serious you are about it, obviously. But still, people have to have a really high level skill as programmers and artists and animators and all that to jump on board a team. And for someone with no directing experience, how did you convince them that you could do this? We say this, it's so wonderful to ask that from the vantage of this
conversation only works because
you did it.
The story, right?
Oh,
Like,
for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like,
think,
even if I think about like when I started at SMS in 2020, that's the same time that you started directing a video game. There's no way that I would have had any idea what to do in 2020 to pull together a group of people to make. I walked into a well-functioning machine and was like, how can I help? I would have just no clue how to even approach finding people.
That's my question is how did you know which machine to build? Was there did you work with producers? Did you work with were there some
And I guess how quickly were you involved in the EA Originals program, which is a program I've lauded a ton. I feel really positively about that program. I hope you had a good experience with that as well.
That is 3 distinct questions now that you have.
Yeah, we've definitely thrown.
Go ahead.
I could let me try and tackle this. So, all right. So put it this way. Through the process of asking the questions and learning about like what needs to be done, for example, getting like a producer on board and all this sort of stuff, like, I knew that I had to figure it out on the way. So, you know, the team that, for example, that I'm with now, for example, are very different from the team that I started with. And that I think is just, something that was a very harsh learning in regards to realizing that, games industry, it constantly changes. Everyone moves, everyone kind of goes through. And that was tough to learn. And I think, but the thing is that ultimately, again, I realized like, okay, I'm still the captain of this ship. So as long as I'm still being captain, I can still make this thing work. So it was a lot of asking questions, of, knowledge sharing, of realizing this, realizing X, realizing that, whatever. And ultimately the building kind of, again, it was very much, this whole game as well was building a team from nothing. Right. And then trying to sustain that. And so, for a very long time, for example, I think we only had 2 programmers, which is insane.
But how did you find them?
You can't build. You can't. Yeah. Well, the thing is like we had them and then we didn't, and then we had them and then we didn't, and it was like we only had 2 programmers in like the big team of a big team of like, I'd say at the time it was like 15, maybe 20 of us, maybe. And the thing is, you can't build a game with 2 programmers.
Yeah, Mike, what's your comparison for that?
systems.
Like,
You can build a game with 1 programmer.
actually,
You can't build the game you built with 2 programmers for sure. No, for what do you mean on like in terms of like how many programmers do I work with?
yeah, what's the like ratio of programmers to artists?
Let's ratio Mike right here.
I don't know how many programmers we have at SNS.
No, it's you have more artists because there's more specializations. So you will always have more artists than you have programmers on like an indie scale team. But he's right. Like from I think in terms of like programmers on my team, I'm trying to do a percentage because I don't want to talk necessarily about how big my team is right now. It's around I'd say about a quarter to a fifth of the team normally you'd have would be programmers. Does that track with you?
Yeah. It's like, especially for the kind of game that we wanted to make, right? Where there was a lot of systems involved, combat elements, things that needed to be exposed for designers to then play with. Like,
that's the trade-off that people miss, is that basically designers... On some level, there's a lot of really great discipline and I say this as a former designer myself, like there's a lot of great talent being a designer, but designers to an extent are an offset to programmers. If you have more programmers, you can have less designers. Sure. If you have less programmers, you will need more designers because basically the tasks of building content out, like there's a relationship to those two.
And for reference to the audience, I would describe the game Tales of Kenzera is Metroidvania, platformy, there's combat, little Ori type vibes. How do you describe it?
Yeah, I would say it's very much like a Metroidvania inspired sort of action adventure platformer, right? And I think like it pulls from the Metroidvania elements as a way to inspire the theme of grief as a whole. I wouldn't necessarily, class it as like the purest of Metroidvanias, but I would say like it is definitely inspired by Metroidvania elements. And I think, that is something that I really wanted to kind of lean into, was this almost like this genre bleeding to a degree, but I'll talk about that in a bit. But like the thing is that, the programmer sort of designer thing, for example, I was learning that on the fly. And that's a very scary lesson to learn while you're building.
You accelerate. You learn to build a plane while the plane was taking off and landing. Literally. It's amazing. Like, I think that's the thing, is the question of like the how of it that kind of we were all circling around. I think it's very easy narratively to assume like, well, you started in 2020 and the game comes out in 2024 and that's the line of production and the game ships. And it sounds like just from the little tidbits we got there's been a few kind of direction shifts, it's been more of a winding road, right? You've kind of gone down some cul-de-sacs, had to turn back, kind of explored. So in terms of the production, it's not been a 4-year full dev cycle with like a very predictable
not
thing.
At all,
it's been kind of stop-start, and you've
I would say
and restarted a few times.
This game came into its element, like as to what it is now today, in the final year of development. In 2023, at the beginning of 2023 to like where we are now, that was the team that essentially that is Surgeon Studios. Yeah. And like we had the workings of essentially what, Zao was going to be. It was there to a degree, but truly it came into its element at that final year. And I think that final year was that moment of like, we've got to do this. we've got a time, we've got a time that we want to hit, and we want to say what that time is, and we're going to do it. We don't want to be in this sort of development hell cycle of just waiting and seeing how we could get it better. We just want to get this heat out there. We want to learn what it means to. So there was this pressure element, and I think that pressure also added to this sense of, wanting to make this thing happen. It was the same thing as like actually, and it's funny, like the same thing happened at the beginning of this cycle where, I started, in, as I say, like 2019-y, 2020 area, and I was like, right, I'm going to build this team. I want to make this game. I'm going to make this game. And rather than necessarily pitch to studios or pitch to publishers or whatever, I basically decided I'm just going to put my savings in this. So I put in all the money that I got from Raised by Wolves, essentially, and a bit of extra bits here and there into funding, I think it was like a 10 or 12 man team, essentially. And at the point of when literally it was all going to, it was the final month, that's when EA were like, hey, buddy, let's help you out here.
I mean, that's always the it's so easy. Like, definitely we are a bunch of survivor bias stories for sure. Like, and I think there's this story is awesome because of how it ends, right? But there's a lot of potential moments. The one thing I want to say, like, that I don't know if this is reassuring or deeply upsetting, but the thing you said of like the game really only came into its own in the last year. That's every game you're ever going to make is exactly the same kind of. No game is ever like, we started the project and then we made the game for X amount of time. And the thing you said of like, you've got a date. That's the fixed thing.
I don't know if I agree with that from my perspective.
From
my perspective of very big scale, I would say that we know 3 years in advance what the game will. Obviously it really gets done at the end, but like it's pretty solid further ahead. But I wonder if, like,
over here on our side of the fence.
Well, I was going to say, I wonder if a AAA thing is like you have to show it to publishers ahead of time or whatever. Like it, it's so much money.
It depends where your line is in terms of what constitutes the final kind of vision of it. But yeah, no, I hear where you're coming from. But also that's also because your dev cycles are so much longer, right?
Also
so
true.
like.
Yeah.
There's
it
definitely
would seem
like
that the trade-off, though, is that, to your point, Alana, on a game like that, if the game if there's something kind of flawed at the heart of the whatever, the design, the conceit, because of how long the runway is to make a game like that, it can be very difficult to know if this is going to actually be a good game until you get towards the end, but you will have made so many irreversible decisions by that point that, I think that's why this moment has suddenly given me kind of a new appreciation for when a big new AAA game comes out and it's kind of given a middling response and it doesn't seem... It's like there's a lot of armchair, like Monday morning quarterbacking that'll go on online of people going, oh, well, they should have done this, they should have done that, and without appreciation for the fact that those decisions were probably made like 3 or 4 years earlier, and then it just... Whereas a game like Zao, or like the games that you've done, Mike, and a lot of games I've worked on,
kind of have more flexibility.
They have, they might have a little bit more nimbleness to course. It's interesting.
Alana's on a tanker and we're on like a series of small canoes, essentially trying to keep up.
I would say that
we can turn later if we're going in the wrong direction.
But the tanker can definitely go a lot further and carry a lot more weight for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
I would say though that, like, for us as well, it gets to a point where pivoting is suicide. And like, you don't want to necessarily change, and even though you can see actually if this change happened, it would be amazing. This is the thing that's happening, currently with me at the moment, right? I'm looking at the game and I'm loving the reception and I'm loving the response, but there is a part of me that's also like, but I could have just, if maybe I did, or maybe if we, and like, and then when someone points it out, you're like, God damn it, I knew it. And it's like, and it's killer. And it's like, and as you say, like, it is that whole thing of...
Is there an example that you mind sharing of that?
Don't make him say something that he doesn't like about his game that came out 2 days ago.
But I will. But it's
come back in 6 months and say.
For sure. No, but the thing is, it's like ultimately, like, the aim is here, right? Like for me, and this is why I love my team, because the team... I have these open and honest conversations with them, and they're very cool about it, and they know like if we can do it, we can do it. If we can't, we can't. So for example, the map, right? The map has been a place of contention for a while. It was one of those things that we had to either fix elements of combat or fix the map. And, you know, we had to choose combat. We had to choose elements of combat because at the end of the day, you're going to be doing that more so than anything. Even though we are very much a Metroidvania-inspired thing, and the map is a crucial point, at the end of the day, you're playing as a warrior shaman. You're not playing as like a cartographer. So you've got to decide on, you know, what you want to do. Now the map comes out. The issue that kills me is every time you go into a new area, it shows you the whole
entire area. Yeah,
Yeah.
I noticed
And
that.
kills
I
me.
wondered if that was a design
kills
choice.
Me.
Yeah.
It was not. It was a sacrifice. It was a sacrifice we had to make.
This is a perfect example of what I was asking, though, because that is so far from a game ruining kind of thing. But I totally sympathize nonetheless with like, because Stray Gods is full of these kinds of things as well, where I'm like, these little things that most people either wouldn't notice or wouldn't have a problem with, honestly, in the same way that the map is not some big issue. Like, some people might even like not having a gradually unfolding map the way a traditional, so-called traditional Metroidvania would. But I get looking at it relative
man,
to what you
it's-
imagine in
But
your
it's
head
also a
and going,
thing-
God damn it.
Most people would assume you can fix that in a day.
Exactly.
Most
And
people,
this-
like-
and that is the thing, and that's the issue. Even there's even this bug. There is this beautiful bug where when you pause the game and then if you're holding like the left or moving to right, and then you pause the game and you unpause it, and then you can move either left or right, you can't do it. You have to literally let go of the stick and then move left or right. And this bug,
I've come across that
this
one.
bug
I've come across that
is
one.
like
That's funny.
literally, and everyone's like, just fix it, man. Like it's like a simple, easy bug.
Just
and it's
delete
like,
that
it's a
from the code.
checkbox.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
it's
you
it's
don't
a menu.
understand.
It's an Unreal tick box of just like movement bug. Do we want that one on or off?
Off.
And this is, but the thing is though, it's like again coming from it from a perspective of like I'm still a gamer, but I again have this much deeper appreciation for games where if you've noticed something or if you feel something is a bit jaggy, I'm like, you know what, it's fine. I can still play it. Like, Prince of Persia, for example, came out with a few little bits here and there. I didn't mind it. But probably if I didn't know what it meant to play, what it means to make a game, I probably would have been like, oh, come on, like, how much money am I spending for this, for this kind of crap?
All
And
those
it's like-
also those things that you kind of went, this isn't that big of an issue. Someone at Ubisoft was crying on launch day.
Oh, totally.
Being in there, 100%.
Totally. And all it takes is one person on Reddit to be like, I kind of stumbled upon this, and you're like, oh man, shit.
It
So,
hurts.
but this is the thing. So, but I also think again, there's a beauty in the ignorance of it all, because I think like if I had known that this was going to be something that I would be suffering from or like dealing with during the process of creating this, man, I don't know if I would have actually made the game. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even think about it. I think I genuinely think, and I remember, EA when I pitched to them this game, the pitch to them a game idea. It was very kind of similar to this, but it was much bigger in scope. Always, I remember pitching it to them, and they pulled me aside after we'd signed everything and whatever, and he said, "Listen, you've just got to. I need to tell you now. The game you've pitched to us is not going to be the game that's coming out." And I didn't believe that until a year before we had to ship this game.
Yeah.
It's also generous of them to say that to you, because again, these are lessons that you learn in like low stakes situations, or you're on a team and you watch your director tearing their hair out trying to do XYZ. The fact that you kind of had people, it speaks to the folks you had at EA working with you, that like that the fact that they didn't hold that over you. I've definitely heard of like first time directors who've had more experience being taken advantage of because they didn't know, oh, don't worry, we know the pitch. Like you're going to aim for that, but you won't quite get there. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like that kind of knowledge, like
Yeah.
that speaks to the caliber of the people you're working with, that they didn't make that more difficult for you than it had to be.
I've a million questions I want to ask, but to backtrack, how did you hire people? How did you get people to agree, hey, I have this idea, I want to make this game about losing my dad and about grief, and it's a very personal story. I have no experience. How did you get people on board?
Yeah, so I had an idea of like, for example, how I wanted the game to play, how I wanted it to feel, an idea of like a mechanic, right? That was, it was the mask switching. It was the idea of switching masks and being able to switch your character, right, to a degree, and how they perform. And I remember when I began pitching to people or telling people the game idea that I wanted to make, I was like, you have to sign this NDA and you have to, we have to talk about this and there's going to be rounds. And I realized that this was stupid because how am I going to convince someone, again, to make this game that I'm not, I'm an actor, right? They've heard me as Bayek of Siwa. It doesn't mean that I can make a video game, and the industry as a whole, as difficult as it is, the idea of even making it, like, everyone tries to make a game and fails. Like, that's normal. And that's totally, it's like film, right? The amount of people who try and make a film and not be able to get it through.
Even the most experienced game devs can still fail.
Well, this is it. So I realized the tactic that worked, or the way that I should approach this was I literally would send them an email being like, look, this is who I am. I'm an actor. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. However, I'm making a game that's about Bantu mythology, and it's about it's really inspired by the grief of my father. These are the kind of mechanics that I want to do. We're beginning, we're starting, and it's going to be a wild journey. Do you believe in me? Because I believe in this project. And 9 times out of 10, it pretty much went through. Like, it literally, the people were like, yep, okay, cool, let's do it. And afterwards, getting the deal with EA was like, it helped.
Yeah.
It didn't necessarily make it a massive help, by the way, because again, people are like, I don't want to work with EA. Like, EA are terrifying. But the originals team was different, right?
Yeah.
And so then I'd have to be like, look, the team here they're allowing me to fail. And that's good because we can know what works and what doesn't. Are you going to be on board? And it was a lot of faith. Like, people had to put a lot of faith in me. And don't get me wrong, this is the thing. This is what I mean by, like, the team that I started with probably, aren't necessarily the same team now that are at the end, is because making an indie game, you're running on an indie budget, And there.
Well, that was what I was going to ask. You were
Yeah.
looking away, so I did like a sight gag of putting like when they asked how did you get programmers, I put a £5 note in the bottom of the screen. You were looking away, so it looked like I was taking a piss. It was a good visual gag. It was not a very good visual gag, but like I was going to ask, like, so when you were going to those people, and for sure, being someone who can inspire people and have that vision, that's obviously a massive part of it. Did you said you were lucky, well, not lucky, sorry, you worked really fucking hard for it. You had a bit of funding that you were throwing at that yourself, so you were kind of self-funding those first few explorations. So it's a shame that those people didn't kind of come along for the whole journey. That's a shame in terms of the programmers. We're often working at the indie scale, right? It's hard.
It's tough, and like I don't blame it. Like, people've got families to feed, and
course,
and people have got they've got to make a living. So I get it, and I think like and also the thing about making an indie game, and especially you just don't know what's going to happen. I again was at this moment of like, I think there was this sheer element of like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
Like, I was insane in the sense of like, this needs to be done. I don't care whether hell or high water, like, I will make this game come out the other end. Whereas if it wasn't for that, I don't think it would have happened. So it's, there was, and I think like, for me, it was all about knowing that I just have to get this. I just have to get this through. I have to learn about what it means to ship a game. I have to learn about what it, the bug processing, the whole localization. I need to learn this knowledge because I know.
And you
that
localized into which
Swahili.
African language? Swahili, right?
Yeah.
Like, was there even interest? Did you go to like an off-the-shelf localization company to get that? Like,
no man. I asked my cousin.
I know how hard it is to get like some European languages, like in those structures.
I
That's
literally.
wild.
So this is it. So I was like, right, we're gonna do it in Swahili. Great. And EA were like, how do you do it in Swahili? I was like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. So then, literally, I'm calling up Side, basically, who are the the voiceover.
Yeah,
people
they're
out
awesome.
here being like,
They're awesome.
Yeah, we want to do Swahili. They're like, okay, cool. Do you have any actors involved? Then cut to me calling my cousin, being like, bro, I need you to find actors who can speak Swahili and do this, because I can't do it right now. Like, I am literally doing everything. Can you do it? And he's like, I got you. So then he ended up, getting all the actors, and I'm like, these are the actors. Awesome. And so it was just, literally doing it. And I remember my cousin calling me being like, bro, there is so much dialogue in this. You're mad.
Yeah. That's wild. And kudos, like I again, like for folks who don't know, Cider are an amazing like London-based voiceover studio, and their attitude to me has always been exactly what you're saying of like, sure, like whatever the request is.
We have a Side LA as well, by the way. I don't know if it's the same company. That's why I assumed you were talking about Side LA.
Yeah,
I've
expanded
worked
into
with
LA.
them times. They're awesome. Yeah.
Really and even good. And this is the thing. So we worked with two. So we worked with Liquid Violet for the English VO, and I'm really, really close with Liquid Violet in regards to like they let me direct it, they let me do whatever, right, which is really cool, and I love them to bits. And Side, they just took the punt on this Swahili kind of voiceover shtick. So cool. Yeah, I mean, again, like this is what I mean by it. This whole process genuinely felt like it was just ragtag. It was just survival. Figure it out as you go along, because at the end of the day you've got a game that you've got to make. And it got real when I announced it at the Game Awards, and I remember EA being like, are you sure you want to put a date? Are you sure you want to put a date? And I remember thinking it's
a great way to get things done,
because this is it, because as a gamer, if I'm seeing it, first of all, I don't like seeing trailers without any gameplay. That's like my thing. And then secondly, I don't like seeing a trailer without any date on there. But I totally understand why that's the case, because you just don't know. This industry is brutal. But I was like, no, we're putting a date there, we're putting gameplay in there. And even if something changes within the gameplay, I don't care. You want to show something. And that's what we did, and it helped. And it's like, it's one of those things where I'm just looking at it like, how the hell did I get here?
It's crazy.
It seems like your edge, to an extent, is being comfortable with those unknowns, right? Like that's a thing that you seem to be able to exist in that space,
and maybe being a little stubborn
and navigate it.
Which I think,
absolutely,
I think can help you.
Very stubborn. Yeah.
Well, that's the. Oh, go on.
I was going to say, but I also think the reason why being an actor is just always unknowns. And that's the thing. You go into it. You audition for something. You don't know whether you're going to get it,
or if they're even going to reply. Idea. Right? Like who knows?
Or even if they're going to. Well, this is it, right? I mean, like I have, the roles that I have gotten, for example, like even Raised by Wolves with Ridley Scott, for example. In my head, it wasn't my role. Like truly, it wasn't my role. And what ended up happening is again going through all these rounds. I think I went through 9 rounds. And in every single round, I had to give it my all. There was a point where it was between me and one of the Skarsgård brothers. And I was like, this ain't my job.
It's hard to imagine anyone else in that role, though. It's so specifically played by you. Like,
this is the thing. But this is it. But it was between me and I think it wasn't Alexander Skarsgård. It was his other brother who played Floki.
There's a joke here in LA. Yes, there's a joke here in LA where like I've been to many a party where there is a Skarsgård. And there's a joke here in LA that's like, they're everywhere. There's so fucking many of them. There are just Skarsgårds everywhere you look.
They are. And this is it. But this is it. So I live in the unknown. Like even after having worked on that, and even after even doing House of the Dragon, for example, like I live in this constant unknown, not knowing when the next paycheck is going to come through.
Yeah.
So to kind of dance in that with making this game, that was the easy part. The hard part was essentially trying to get the art piece that you wanted, this technical art piece that you wanted to communicate what it needed to communicate.
Yeah.
And that to me is still something that I'm still trying to figure out.
You just tapped on something that I've wanted to ask. I've been very curious about, especially once the game came out. I found myself going, how did this work? You mentioned House of the Dragon, Raised by Wolves. Obviously, the most time-consuming and demanding bit of acting that you've done the last several years was portraying Eros from Stray Gods.
Totally. Absolutely.
How did you manage? Again, this might be a slight bit of cracking open a closet with personal information kind of thing, but how did you manage taking on jobs while in the midst of directing this game? Because you were acting all through this process.
Yeah, I for one, I didn't sleep. So every time that I would finish on a job, so for example, I remember at Raised by Wolves, I had a rig built so then I could actually play and work on the games. Luckily, we're all remote based, right? We're a remote studio, so we're all running through Slack. So at the time frame that I was finishing on set, I would come back to the hotel that I was staying in, and I would catch up with messages and give my points of feedback and direct that way. if I was on set learning my lines, I would learn my lines, and then I would go on my Slack on my phone and do video meetings that way. There were many a time where I was literally in costume and raised by wolves, and I'd be having a milestone review.
Please God, tell me there's some screenshot or video capture saved.
Like, honestly, like it was. So I was like, again, it's this whole thing of like, I told the team I'm on call no matter what, because it's a priority. This is what I care about. And so there was a lot of a time.
Ridley, you're gonna have to wait.
You're gonna have to wait, mate. And this is the thing. But the thing is, I think I was very lucky because the people that I was working with were fascinated by it, and that's why they were kind of like,
That's
okay,
great.
well, yeah, you do your thing. You know, and because they understood the process of creating something, you've got to kind of put your all in it. And so, but also, you know, part of me was, I'd established a very strong leadership team that were able to kind of take my vision and get the idea of it and run with it. And I think like that, I'd very much kudos to them. Like, you know, I've got, Zoe Brown, who's our producer at the studio now. She came in, like, I think, she's now been at the studio for 2 years, I think. 2 years. And, you know, she's a saving grace, man, because she just, and she's like so honest. I'd tell her like, I want to do this. And she'd be like, there's too much scope there. It's not going to work. You're going to kill the team. And I'm like, okay, but what about this? Yeah. She's like, that makes sense. And then she'd run with it. And it's like, and I think you need that, right? You need like a strong core leadership team where you can tell them something and then they get it and then they move on. And also I have to accept as well that I'm never going to be right? Like for a long time, we had like 4 masks. We had 3 masks, which you could, you know, play and switch between. And then you had unmasked Zhao, which is essentially, you know, acts as a mask. And it just was too much juggling. It just didn't make any sense. And I remember, you know, my designer being like, we got to cut masks. But it was, for me, it was like, this was the integral bit. This is the thing that I pitched to EA. I like said, this is what's going to be like, you got to have like these different masks because it represents grief, the different faces you wear while you're going along. Like artistically, it made sense. Like, listen to me as an artist, care about me. And essentially, Zai was like, bro, this ain't working. And I had to trust him. And I had to listen to that. And I had to react to that. And so by, again, essentially giving my team the chance of being able to not only express themselves and go with their direction as well, that's essentially how I was able to also do the acting, because they also knew that with me acting, with me talking, that's the strongest part of me, right? Me doing House of the Dragon only benefits the studio and only benefits the game, right? Because it reaches an audience that aren't necessarily going to think about looking at games, right? And I think even EA understood that, because that was the other thing that I remember talking to EA was like, how the hell are you going to run a studio when you're being an actor? And there was a lot of trust and faith that they had to put into me to do that. And and we're here now, you know?
Well, the irony I just experienced was I had to look away for 5 minutes because my producer sent me a bunch of stuff to check in on. And you're absolutely right.
What do you mean this show is not your full-time job?
Yeah, for real. Where the hell is all that Patreon money going?
I just got like a list of 10 bullet points from my producer as you were talking there.
Yeah, well, you can check that when you're off the clock, Mike. I haven't given.
I will. I sent a message saying I'll be back.
Yeah,
it's
thank
fine.
you. Appreciate that.
But it is exactly what you're saying. Like, it is that you rely on those people for sure. It's massive.
Yeah.
I love that this came from your perspective of being a gamer into, you know, game director. What do you think is the thing you expected the least when you started out? Was there anything about making a game that really caught you off guard or that you weren't expecting?
Yeah. How much you're not making the game. Like, and what I mean by like that is you start off with these cool ideas, and then as it kind of goes into fruition and it happens, you then are, because you are in charge of the company, you're in charge of all the other elements, you know, legal stuff, lawyer fees, the accountants, making sure that everyone's paid on time, making sure that the studios are flat. You know, you then realize you're not doing anything that is making the game. You are literally keeping the house alive.
Because you're also the studio head, which sometimes I guess is separate.
This is it. And like, so that was also a big learning for me, was like, oh man, I have to do so much more. I have to get contracts drafted up. I have to, you know, look at NDAs. I have to, you know, do interviews. I have to, you know, do, you know, reports. Like there was a lot of the process of the creative element that I wasn't doing that really irked me.
It would seem to me, from my point of view as a as a perpetual outsider, as a freelancer who never works staff, and therefore I get a kind of slightly bird's eye view on these workings because I'm sort of outside looking in. I've seen one studio. I don't see any reason why I should need to keep this a secret, but one of the studios I've worked with for a number of years, the creative director is very hands-on with the design and with the art direction, and it's something that he does on a very personal level. And so, but to your point, there's so much to running a company and, making sure that, the next project pitches are being teed up, even though we're well before the release of the current one, all that kind of stuff. So he'll do like these blackout dates once a week or once every 2 weeks where he's like, I'm not available for meetings. I'm not available for anything. I just want to go down a rabbit hole of like creative work because it is so easy to just, that slips away. And you realize I haven't, for a person whose job is making a game, I feel like I haven't been making a game for the last month. And he's had to really regiment his schedule where literally a producer will message me like, by the way, if you need to reach him, ping me if it's on this day. Because I have like the hotline phone for emergencies basically. And it makes sense as a strategy, because otherwise, you spend all your time signing documents and reading emails as your way to ship this personal project that couldn't be further from all that stuff. I think people don't. That's another one of those things that you don't see it until you're in it. I had two more quick questions I want to ask if you don't mind, because I have a hard out in 5 minutes. Unfortunately, obviously, carry on without me. But I kind of already know the answer to this from what you said a second ago. But I was curious, since you were saying maybe this is a film, maybe this is a game, like at the very earliest stages of it, were the core mechanics, like when considering this as a game, was it always this kind of game, or were you looking at the full spectrum of game mechanics and genres and then landed on this one?
It was always this. So for me, again, like the way I wanted to lead with it was, okay, what's the story, right? It's about grief. It's about the journey of grief. Okay, what genre represents that best? Oh, Metroidvania. Okay, how hard is it to make a Metroidvania? That's very hard. Okay.
But you say that as if that's a given. What about a Metroidvania feels like the most natural sort of way into exploring this idea? Because I feel like a different game director would go, oh, well, obviously it's a strategy game or something.
That's why we have lots of directors, so they can.
This is it. Like, so for me, like it was the idea of you're throwing a character in the middle of this huge world they have no idea about, and they have to learn about it as they go along. It's frightening, it's scary, it's weirdly beautiful, there's something mysterious about it, alien, but you can never prepare for it. But the longer you spend time in it, the more comfortable you get with it. Oh, it's got like secret little hidden bits here that I didn't necessarily realize until now, or until I've gained this ability, which I
you
was
literally
always
step through gaining abilities and tools to deal with the scenario, right?
And this is exactly what grief is, right? Like my experience of grief was being, as much as I kind of knew my father was passing, but I didn't. I wasn't prepared for it. So then when I'm now, 20 years old, he passes away, and now this world is like, it wasn't supposed to happen. I'm now thrown into this very vivid, very kind of loud world that continues to spin, even though my world, I feel like, has just stopped. I have to just cope. I have to realize, I have to get used to it. And the moments of anger or the moments of sadness, I'm now being able to use and harness as a way of being able to kind of get through this bit here or that bit there. It's almost like, actually, I've gone through worse shit. I can deal with this. Me not getting a job as an actor or through an audition, that's not the worst shit, because I've experienced, my father passing. So like, there's elements like that you for me is like, that speaks to what a Metroidvania is. And it's not necessarily that I will now be healed of grief and kind of get over it. I'm just kind of comfortable with the idea that it exists. And I think like that's what a Metroidvania is. It's like every time that character enters that world, it's not that it is their place now and they dominate it. they still have to survive in a world that is going to be set out to kind of, they feel like it's going to get them. And
They just
that,
feel
to me,
better
is why
equipped, essentially.
they feel better equipped. And that's why, to me, that was the right genre. You look at an open world, for example, and there is a sense of discovery and kind of, wanting to learn about it, and kind of this sense of like wanting to go out for it. Whereas with a Metroidvania, it's almost designed to throw you into this space kind of raw. And if you look at, for example, like a roguelite, right, that focuses on death a lot, right? But the thing is, it's the death of the player. It isn't the death of someone else. So to me, that's why the Metroidvania genre made sense. And that's why the game was inspired by the Metroidvania sort of space as a whole. In regards to like the mechanics of the mask switching, again, as I mentioned, it was supposed to reflect the idea of switching your masks and depending on your personal state or who you're talking to. Like the mask that I'm having with you guys is different to the mask that I have with my mother, but I have to flip it on the fly as soon as possible, especially while going through grief. So that was where that came by. So these core pillars or these core elements were there. They were always there. We just had to build around them as we kind of got, as we kind of went along.
I love it. That's a very compelling explanation for there could only be this one sort of
That's strong
genre.
game direction, right? That's what that is. It's
Yeah.
like you knew what your vision was and you executed it.
I unfortunately really do have to leave. I just did send a message trying to buy myself an extra a couple of minutes because I won't be able to do justice to this whole thread. But I would obviously be remiss to not ask about how you connected with my friend and colleague Nanita, and how your experience was directing score in a game like this. I mean, and also it's worth just I will insert that first time directed games don't usually have this level of polish in the integration of the score. And so whoever on your team was responsible for that, please give them my kudos, because I was actually quite impressed. I was expecting it to feel a little rough around the edges and go, this was beautiful soul and compliment all these other aspects of it. But honestly, also on a technical level, I was finding myself going, wow, this really can roll with the best of them.
Rob is great, man. Yeah, no, I started. So Nanita was actually one of the first people I approached during the creation of this game, and she's been stuck on this job from the beginning. So, and it was really funny because when I messaged her and said I need to get you on board, she was like, normally I come at the last minute. I'm normally brought in, quite near the end. To be part of the process from the get-go, like, it's really cool. So she kind of, she was listening to me talk about this game, talk about the story, talk about the narrative, talk about what I wanted to do with it from the beginning. And, she'd send pieces through and we'd kind of assess them. And then really, truly the magic sort of the glue when things started getting, when everything started happening, lots more people started getting in, I had a lot more jobs to do. Rob Brown, who's our sort of technical audio director in a way, he was the glue between me and Anita and the game, essentially, in integrating all of the music, the vibe that we were trying to talk about. I would tell, Anita and Rob the vibe that I was thinking about. Rob would then translate that into a technical aspect that would be like, oh, maybe it would be cool if we did this and this and that. And, Anita would then react and I would then react. And it just felt really natural. I really enjoyed that process because, again, for me, music and score is such an important part of anything, and I think Nanita just executed it brilliantly. This capturing of, again, two different people from two different cultures in a way, trying to communicate with one another musically. And that was something that I remember learning from drama school. It's like, musicals, for example, it's like, why do these characters break into song? Is because they can't talk about.
Well, it's because Grace casts a spell and they have no option. So
well, there you go.
They want some things. They got to tell us about it.
That's the other thing as well. But that's essentially how it happened. Like I met Nanita very, very early on during this process when I pitched to her, even before EA. And as soon as EA came on board, she was like, cool, and that's when everything signed on. And yeah, she's been building the musical score from us from the get-go.
It's funny because I've known her for quite a while. And at one point, a few years ago, she did ask me something like, you've worked on a bunch of projects where you were involved for a long time. How do you kind of keep your thoughts clear over multiple years? It didn't occur to me she would have been potentially asking about your game.
About this game.
Which is pretty funny. Well, dude, congrats. I've only been able to play. I mean, I've put in somewhere between 3.5 and 4 hours into it. And what impresses me is that every time I kind of crack open a new area, I'm like, oh, wow, this is not a small game. There's a lot. I don't feel like I'm even halfway through.
It's about 10 hours-ish, right?
It's about 10 hours,
yeah. Okay, well, there you go. So I'm a third of the way, give or take. Sorry, I got to bounce, but
that's fine. It's all good, man.
I'm so glad to have been able to sit here and pick your brain on this stuff because, yeah, it's a hell of a thing. I will look forward to going back and actually listening to the rest of this conversation later, which is a rare time where I listen to episodes of Play, Watch, Listen. It'll help that I'm not here. Anyway. Enjoy the rest of your chat, everyone. See you later.
Dude.
See you later.
Man, that guy
Finally,
fucking
he's
sucks.
gone. We can have a real conversation. Jesus. I like that we went to the exact same place. We betrayed him so quickly.
Man, what a dickhead. Oh, God.
We're a terrible group of people.
I'm not part of this conversation.
Rise above.
Yeah, I respect it. I wanted to ask as well, what if you'd learned, let's put away for me to phrase this, what do you know now that would have made you approach this whole thing differently?
Yeah, I think...
You know what I mean?
I think... Yeah, no, I do. I think it would have been built like having like a strong, like a team that I know from the get-go are like, we're going to drive through this, and knowing like the roles that needed to be filled. That would, for example, like, for a very long time, as I said, we were missing coders.
Yeah.
We didn't have coders. Actually for a while, we didn't even have like a senior producer. Like, we had producers on board and they were brilliant. But I think to have that, someone who's almost like, who's actually shipped a game, who's, seen the game from beginning to end as a producer is like, whoa, it's different. So like, yeah, it's like having these roles from the start, which, we kind of did, but I think again, at the same time, I think, and EA kind of saw that, but there's something to be said about, like the team that I have now, like they're hardened, man.
Well, that's what's exciting to me is like how you're going to go forward with that team and what you're going to make next. Because you've learned all these lessons. Like you just said, it's amazing to have someone on the team who's shipped a game from beginning to end. You're now obviously in that category.
Now you all have.
So like you're one of those people. Like there's an amazing.
And it's amazing how many people haven't. Like, it's amazing.
There are people with long careers in games who have never shipped
a game, who literally are like...
I feel really bad for them. It's people who've had a couple of projects cancelled in a row. It's really easy to rack up a decade without...
It's mad. And it's it's such an experience. It is such an experience.
That was the question I asked you before we started recording, that I was like, we'll save this for the show. But like, so that's the thing that fascinates me. A question for you in terms of your experience going from a contributor to projects on launch day versus the director on launch day. How is that different? I imagine it is.
Oh, it's so different. Yeah. It's so much more personal. It's so much more real. As a contributor, you're not refreshing Twitter as much as I am. You're not like reading. You're not
name searching the game every 2 minutes,
mate. Like literally every single second of the day.
Have you gotten to the point where that's slowed down enough now that you can actually carry on, or is it still up there? Right?
There, man. It still irks me, man. Like it's still one of those things, and I think the other thing as well, it's like when you're listening to people like who give you feedback, and look, and it's absolutely right, and I think they should, and I think it, and I wouldn't want it any other way. But when the feedback is like, yeah, it's all right, and you're like, but I love you though, and don't get me wrong, like that's the artistic process. That just part of it, and you've got to accept it. And this is one of those ones that you just have to do. But it is like, it's very different. Me playing as Bayek, for example. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I'm a massive Assassin's Creed fan, but I knew that at the end of the day, there's always another job.
Yeah.
I'm always, as the actor, I've got another job that I've got to do and move on from. With this is my life, man. This is my baby. So I've got to see it through. and I've got to, and I want people to like it. I want people to, to work with it. So it's a lot. It's very different, basically. It's like, I think it just feels like, as much as, and that's the thing, like, even though it's not even the fact that I've been so vulnerable with it, and because it's about, the grief that I felt, like, that part is like, oh, cool, that's fine. It's the actual delivering of a product, and actually, as a business, that's where it's like, oof, there's a lot riding here. Like, I don't think I'm happy that I was so vulnerable, and like, I don't really, someone turns around and is like, yeah, I didn't really feel the grief. I'm like, cool, that's your problem. That's your process. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, that doesn't affect me. But if someone's like, but the map, I'm like, yeah.
There's also a disassociation that happens. Like, I don't know about you, but like when I feel I care more about the stuff like the map because I made the big creative choices years ago, and I've lived with them.
Right.
And they are what they were. It's the stuff that you were racing to try and get done before the game shipped and didn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's the stuff that hurts. The other therapeutic advice I'll give as well, you may have heard this from someone else, but like, think of your favorite game and then go and find the lowest review of that game. It's the most useful therapeutic process on launch day. Like, of just like, every game has like people who, like, say, go, oh, it's not for me. That's every game in history. That's every work of art in history. So it's all good. It's all good.
Are you watching Twitch streams and YouTube videos and all that good stuff?
Yeah, everything. I'm watching everything. Reading everything. And like, look, don't get me wrong. At the moment, there's, especially in the industry that we are in today, and good old social media, there are a lot of, silliness and weird point of views, but
things that can be annoying that you can't refute, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't think that's probably what he was referring to.
No,
you're referring to idiots. Yeah,
I'm referring to the
I know what you're referring to.
Ones who...
I'm aware.
Okay. But the thing is, it's like, but that is, and don't get me wrong, it's noise. It's what it is.
It is.
It's not like, and to be honest with you, it's something that even just as an actor, I've been surrounded by all my life. Yeah. So it's kind of like, sure. But at the same time, but when you can filter through that and kind of wade through that, and then you're like, oh, you get it, but you don't. And you're just like, that's the stuff that really kind of gets at me, But
and again, the fact that you can't say anything, I find that very annoying with stuff like this, like where it's like, if I were to respond to a certain thing of someone not getting something or not understanding something, it would make it worse. It's not worth it. Yes. So you just have to read it and let it wash over you, and it's very frustrating. Like, I find that stuff really hard,
and I think, but the thing is that, and ultimately, actually, it's kind of a bit like, and I found there's a slight power in it as well in regards to being like, sure, okay, like, you can, irks me for a second.
Yeah.
It's living rent free for the rest of your bloody life, man. So like it's what you want to do.
True.
But at the same time, I think, I think that the difficulty is as well, like when you're wading through that, and then you hit like an actual really good piece of criticism, and you're like, oh, that's good. I've got to take that on the chin and move on from that as well. So you're having to deal with all these different weights of things. You know what I mean?
You have to compartmentalize them in real time, or like prioritize them in real time.
Yeah, and like, and that's the other thing as well. You can kind of forgo that as the actor, because as the actor, it's like a lot of the time, you can kind of just push it away, be like, all right, yeah, sure. You didn't like me playing that role, or you thought I did a bad, job in that role. Well, I'll just go to another role and do something really cool there. Or you just don't like me because of, just how I am and the way I look. Okay, yeah, sure, whatever. That's a you problem, ain't a me problem. So, but whereas it being a product that you give, because that's the thing, you as the developer, and I take this really personally as well, in the sense of like, I want to deliver something that you are going to enjoy. No matter whether I'm the actor or the developer, actually, it's in everything. But I think there's something really special about being in charge of something and being able to and know that you are the one who's running ship, and then giving something to someone. Like, I want to please you. Like, that's my sole goal. I remember even like when we were talking, like, for the price point for this game, for example, it's an EA game. Right, so you've got to think EA business. Like, you got to be that way, right? And at the time we were like, should it be like $35 or $30? Like, how much was Hellblade? What was the length of Hellblade or anything like this? But then at the time I was like, yeah, but I want as many people to play this as possible. So let's just make it the price of like what pizza would be, call Pizza Hut or like Domino's. Like you'd get like a meal deal with them, and you feel like you're stealing like a big bottle of Coke with a large pizza for like $17.99. That's amazing. And like I was just like, let's just make it.
Pizza. That's good economics.
I 100% made the same argument though. Like I bet you're absolutely right.
That's incredible.
Because it is there. But you need that push and pull, right? Like you need that conversation. You need you in the room, but you also need the suit in the room, kind of with the other direction, and you find something good in the end. Yeah,
That's cool. And so this is the thing. So like, so you do want to please someone. So then when it doesn't do it, you feel like you've wronged them.
Yeah, you've thrown a bad party, right? That's
you've thrown the bad party. That's exactly it. And I think like that's the thing that you're constantly wrestling with. But again, I always have to remember that this is an art form. It's a technical art. There's going to be one person in the audience who's going to be totally moved. Their life is going to be completely transformed. And there's just going to be one person who's just going to be like, sure, and then move on to the next thing. But as long as I've, moved one person, then that's special, man.
You know what will surprise you as well is over the course of like years, like when you'll ship more games, and some of them will be awesome, some of them will be very, very good, and you'll like oscillate between those two. What's fascinating is over time the reactions to those games also shift. So it's temporal in a way that you don't realize right now. Right now, you're like, this is definitively the opinion on this game. And to be clear, this game's been really well received. I should say that for anyone who's listening. Like we're talking a lot about negative criticism, but it's a really good game and it's been really well received. But what you'll find is over time, I've definitely had this over a decade now with stuff we've put out. You'll have people come up to you and they'll literally come to you and say, your game changed my life, and you'll like in your head you'll instantly be like, oh, they mean the 9 out of 10, and then they'll name the worst thing, the least selling thing you've played.
Really?
And it happens so
well, Mike,
often.
it was the iCarly game.
That's
and it was a Brazilian. It's Brazil that they love it,
but like sincerely, it's a no. It's a whole thing. This is law. We can't throw law at him. But genuinely, like there is this thing where you realize that, because I think everything about the way we talk about games is so fixated on the moment of launch. Yeah. It is fascinating as a director, kind of 10 years down the road, looking back and seeing, oh, that game's the one that had staying power. That's the game that people still come up to me about. Or that game that everyone thought was incredible when it came out, now kind of no one plays. And it's just fascinating seeing how that, and you've got kind of the front row seat to see that with your own games. But talking to lots of people, it seems that that's a really common thing, that you're like, it changes so much over your lifetime as well, which is fascinating. And I love that. It means that everything has value in a way. Its value might be in a different moment than its release.
Different moment, different time. It's really cool. No, and that's so true. That is so true, actually.
What's the goal going forward? Yeah. Do you want to make more games? Like, are you full steam ahead on continuing with the studio?
I just want to tell stories. So I mean, like, again, and I feel like we have just entered our phase of like, okay, we found out.
Now we figured it out.
Now what? We the train is there, the train is moving, like, and it's there's quite a nice track that we can go on here, but then we're in this phase right now where we just don't know what could happen next. And I think again it's that sense of, I'm kind of comfortable in it, but I'm also aware that some people aren't. So like, and I think like, and it's that juggling of like, okay, we got to figure it out. And so
it seems you need to find something else impossible to do, right? That seems to be the angle.
This is the angle. So, but so I'm so down for going through this again, and especially with the team now, because it's going to be something like, I feel like it's going to be something special, because again, we have now figured out how each one of us works.
Yeah, and how you work together, and
how we want to work together, what we like, what we don't like, and like that's
it's cool, going to terrify you how fast the next thing gets rolling, because you've got those shortcuts. Yeah. It's going to be massive. Uptick.
So this is it. Yeah. So this is what I'm really kind of excited.
Sit here for a little while. Be in this moment.
Yeah.
And And the other thing that's I'm interested to see as well is you've also got options in terms of like scale. Like there's the classic thing of just making bigger and bigger and bigger stuff. But there's lots of studios that kind of oscillate. Maybe you take this team and you see what something small and precious you can make, or you go for something ridiculously massive. Like you've got some really great options available to you.
Yeah,
how
and I
well
think
this
it's
is
just
doing,
about
and
that's it. And it's just about what the choice is. And I think like this is the space we're in. And you know, look, it's the time of recording this. It's been only 2 days since this game has launched. It feels like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's like it is just it's very surreal. It's very surreal.
Super cool. The last question I'm going to ask you before I have to get back to work is, I said earlier, a lot of people want to do this. I think a lot of people think they can do what you've done here. Very few people actually pull it off, if not like almost none, right? Like it's very rare that somebody outside of your cases like Stardew Valley goes, I'm going to make a video game. I don't know how any of this even works. Let's do it. Do you have any advice for somebody who might be listening to this and wanting to direct their first game, but they don't have programming experience? Or
I mean, again, I just did it.
That's my answer to whenever someone asks how to be a content creator. I'm like, literally just start doing it, right? Like just start making the stuff.
It. Like, and that's it. And be okay with failing.
Yeah.
I think that's really it. Like, honestly, the amount of times.
Well, yeah, we've only seen the success. You probably had a ton of failures, right? Like throughout the whole process of 4 years.
Oh my God. Like, honestly, like there were 101 moments of like, this is going to die.
Yeah.
Like truly, like to get like there were so many moments. So, but the thing is, it's just about persevering and just pushing. And I think, that was the one thing as well, like I learned. And the other thing as well, it's like when you look at other people's experience, it isn't the same. I think I learned a lot from just being an actor in regards to what it takes to be an actor in order to what it actually takes to make a game or run a studio. You have to be afraid of failing. Oh, no, sorry, you have to be afraid of... No, you have to not be afraid of failing. And what I mean by that is like essentially knowing that you will have moments where you think this is it.
Yeah.
This isn't going to go through, but I have to keep going. And that's essentially that's the trick. That really is the trick. And like, because again, Mike's journey is very different to my journey. Your journey is very different to my journey. And it's like, but we're all doing the same thing. And that's the thing about art, right? Even making films, like, one person making a film is so different to the other person making a film. Even Ridley Scott says it's every single film's a different process. Yeah. It's a different thing. Even though he uses the same team, it's just a different beast. Yeah. And you have to be cool with that. And I think like that is something that, again, as I said, like I've taken with me. It's this sense of not being afraid to fuck up, because that's how you learn.
Mm. Well, that's I've heard stand-up comics say that like the only differentiator for a successful stand-up is someone who didn't give up when they should have, right? Like basically they stuck it out. And I think that definitely seems to align to this story is you had so much conventional wisdom and probably people directly to your face saying this wouldn't work, this wouldn't happen.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
And you've absolutely nailed it. It's incredibly inspiring and is going to I think it's going to inspire a lot of people. I really do. I think it's a great story for sure.
Well, huge
and I
congrats.
think the humility with which you talk about it is important as well. It's really cool.
And thank you for joining us. The game Tales of Kenzera is out anytime. Literally anytime.
What's it out on?
On all platforms, I believe.
Excellent. It is, yeah. PlayStation 5, Xbox Series S and X, and Nintendo Switch and PC.
And you can get it right now. Where can people find you, Abu? Where can people find you at?
I am, I'm on Twitter, but I'm trying to get off that. It's what it is.
Good choice.
But like, I am on Twitter though, as Abzi Babzi. I am on Instagram as Abzi Salim, and also on TikTok now, which I've not actually.
Look at you go.
To be honest, I haven't posted anything, right? But I'm now going to try and say like, I'm on TikTok. So then it pushes me to actually do something on it. So, but you can find my studio, Surgeon Studios, on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok as well.
Cool. We'll leave links in the description. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. I'm Pearson, video game writer. That's Mike Bithell. He's a video game director. That is Abubakar Salim. I said that your name's so fast. Is also a game director and actor. And we will see you next week or the week after.
Thank you very much. Thanks, team.
Cheers.
Take care.